IVM.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 50th episode of
Postcards from Nowhere.
Woo!
With Utsav Mamoria, and you have two special guests this episode, a crossover from the IVM ecosystem and family, Ayushi and
Rytasha.
Thank you. I love it when you say my name.
So, for the listeners that don't know, we are the hosts of Agla Station Adulthood, which is a sort of coming-of-age adulthood podcast that's also on the IVM network. And we also recently did our 50th episode about 2 weeks ago.
Congrats, Utsav. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and thank you for... Actually, I had a question before we go ahead, which is technically what is the cutoff age to be on your podcast as an adult? Right? Because I feel that I might have crossed that age into middle age at some point.
We actually
There's no cutoff age for real adults.
But we recently, in our 50th actually, we talked about, we have this concept on the show that we call baby adults, which is what the block that we put ourselves in, which is like this, not baby, but
18 to 35.
But we have said till 35.
I'm just at the edge. I turned 35 in January, so I just made it in time.
So you're still a baby adult.
Still a baby adult for a few more
Still got it.
Yeah.
Tell us, Utsav. I would like to know about you a little bit.
So, you always have those kind of kids, when they turn 4 or 5 years old, and they always have these questions, ye aisa kyun hai, wo waisa kyun hai, right? Very annoying kind of kids. I have become that as an adult and made it a career, right? So that is who I am, right? I do that for a living. My job is actually to understand human behavior, right? And of course, I have to monetize it, kyunki paisa chahiye. So that's what I do. I help brands and companies make better products or services using that understanding, right? So that is what I do for a living. So basically, I have to channel my curiosity in some way. I thought might as well make good use of this annoying feature of mine to make money. And of course, it spilled into other parts of life, which is traveling, of course. It's a great way to satisfy that kind of a curiosity, right? So that's how this whole thing. So everything I do is driven by that personality trait of mine, if I were to say, to understand and making sense of the world around me.
But that's such a good way of saying that he basically took his best quality as a child and you've turned it into a career as an adult. I think that's great.
I've done the same exactly. Okay, I was a nautanki as a kid and I've just monetized that nautanki in my adulthood.
No, it's okay.
There is still time, right? I mean, it's not like you are 75 or something. There's still a whole lot of time to this.
I love talking. Nobody has ever been able to shut me up in life. And now I have a podcast. So it's all worked out.
It's really working out. And then you said about your podcast, Utsav, how did you decide you wanted to start this particular theme? And how did you find the name? I'm very curious about it.
Okay. So the story is actually slightly long-winding. But since we have our own podcast, why should we not use that time?
Exactly.
Right? Of course, that's the whole point of having a podcast. So what happened is that there's another podcast on the IVM network called Simplified, right? And one of my friends is the host there, Chuck. And he was trying to, of course, try to simplify things. That's what they do. So he said that since you work in the space of human behavior and market research and consumer insights and all, why don't you come and talk to people about what actually it is, right? I mean, beyond the fancy designations and buzzwords and stuff, what it actually entails. So I told him, see, honestly, you're my friend and thank you so much. But really, I don't have anything beyond 5 minutes to say, right? So he's like, so just come. If it's a bad episode, we'll junk it, right? Big deal. I said, okay, your podcast, your risk. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I went and we had a blast. Like it went on for about an hour and a half, right? And then he said, "Theek hai, chalo, okay, great time." And I also enjoyed it and everything. Okay. So next time what happened is that it's about 2018 odd. And I decided that I wanted to travel a little more than a couple of weeks. So I took a sabbatical, right? And I realized, because when I was trying to take a sabbatical, I said, okay, how should I talk to my company about it? Like I have no experience asking for a 3-month leave from someone. Right? So I decided, okay, so I did my research and talked to a couple of people and all. So then I decided, someone also needs to tell Indians that you can take a sabbatical, but there is a way to go about it. I'm like, then I said, okay, I will tell people how to take a sabbatical in India, especially for an Indian company per se, right? Because it's not really in our culture to, let people take sabbaticals and stuff. So then I said, okay. He said, sure, come. So I had a good time there, right? And then I took that sabbatical, of course. I traveled for 3 months. I went to slightly lesser explored parts of the world. I went to Bosnia, Armenia, and such places. And when I came back, I realized that there is a huge dearth of content on how to travel cheaply internationally. India, of course, you can travel cheaply, one of the definitely, but how to travel cheaply. And I remember I did that 3-month trip in under 3 lakhs, right? All inclusive.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I was like, because of course I only had that much money to save and
yeah, of course.
Yeah, you still have all the stuff, expenses, investments and all that jazz. So I was like, okay, so I did a 2 podcast series, and that's when one of the producers told me that why don't you do your own travel podcast? Right. So till then I was in this whole self-rejection mode, right? Arey mere ko nahi aata, mujhse kaise hoga, mujhe nahi aata podcast karna. And
self-doubt, a big part of adulthood. Glad to know at 34 you still have it.
Absolutely. And I've realized that everyone around me said, why don't you give it a shot? I was the only idiot who was saying, pata nahi karna chahiye ki nahi karna chahiye. And I was like, okay, let's give this a shot. And of course, I came up with the concept, which I took to Kavita and Amit. They jumped it completely. So then I went back to the drawing board, redid the entire concept and came back to them, recorded a couple of pilots. And that sort of worked out. Of course, it took me a little while. I mean, was not used to any audio work at all, right?
Yeah.
So it took a while, and it was narrative. So it had to be in a certain flow, and I had to make sure I'm engaging someone for the 5 to 7 minutes, whatever they're listening. So that happened, and and then it started. And of course, then when you start, you have that thing that, ye koi sunega ki nahi sunega, right? Because every podcast ultimately starts with 0 listeners.
Yeah.
Right? And then you are like, will I run out of steam? Will I run out of ideas? Right?
Oh my God, you're preaching to the choir right now, because we thought that as well. And
I listened to your 49th episode, so I have some context of what you guys are saying.
Same, we also had no experience in this world. We also just decided, kyun nahi, let's try.
Even you, I mean, as Tash, you had some experience in terms of just being in a booth and speaking and performing. Yeah. But for me, sitting down for that first, not even the pilot episode, the trial pilot episode, which was just like shits and giggles, and one day we'll release that. But even those, it was so nerve-wracking to sit there. You don't really know what you're going to sound like, what you're going to say. And then, of course, is anyone listening?
Yeah, is anyone listening? Truly. And the challenge was that I just realized that no one in my own family listens to podcasts. So it is like, this is going to be such a big challenge. My own people are not going to listen to this probably. And which is true. Most of my family members still don't listen to podcasts, even though I have one, because they just don't get the medium.
Your podcast, I have to say, is possibly so listenable.
Listenable is very easy to listen to.
No, it's listenable by a lot of generations or people with, you don't have to be very young or youthful or woke or aware to listen to your show. I think it's just a lot of interesting fun facts about, different countries and little behavioral attributes of these people. But it's interesting for anyone to listen to it, because it's short form, it's 8 minutes. It's great.
Yeah. So I was like, if I have to actually get someone to sample it, it's much easier to tell someone, please listen to this for 5 minutes. Vis-a-vis listen to this for 25 minutes.
Yeah. All your episodes are samples. It's great.
Yeah. So now the idea was, and the thing was that other thing which I realized, I think that is one thing which I took a good decision to be very realistic to how much time I can commit on a weekly basis. Right? I realized that if I have to actually find travel content creators on a week-on-week basis, it's going to be challenging and a scheduling thing. And by the way, hats off to people who do this regularly. I mean, I think it's a very, very challenging thing to do. Yeah. Right?
Content creation is no joke.
Right. And I'm very glad I took this, because I was also moving jobs that time. I was also, good and getting married. I just got married 6 months ago. So
congratulations.
On a very adult step.
Thank you very much. And very happily married at an age when I was already past my sell-by date. Right. So again, found my partner on a dating app, and
that's so
we are going to ask you.
Young and millennial.
Yeah. So, and that has, of course, it's its own story, but thankfully, it was much smooth sailing. Our families were completely chilled about it, or maybe they had given up on us. I don't know which one of it is true. I'd like to believe it's the first one. No, please don't burst my bubble, please. So I was like, there's a lot of change happening in life right now. So maybe it's not a good time to commit to something really, really big. Let's start small and let's see where it goes, right? I mean, what if I run out of steam by episode 20 and I'm like, ये सब grand planning करके क्या ही हो गया types?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And now you're at 50.
Yeah, and now I don't feel like stopping, right? I sort of, it gives me that happiness to, put content out, and even a few people listen to it, you feel, okay, this is worth someone's time.
Of course. And I think like we went through this as well when we thought that maybe we do like 15 episodes, like just 15 short episodes. And then we thought, okay, let's do 20, round number. And then I think after that, we were just like, excuse me, this is fully fun and we love it.
And we want to go on with this till whenever we can.
Yeah. So,
and one more thing which I realized, and I don't know if you guys feel that way or not, is that having something which is outside your immediate source of work or employment, which you enjoy, really helps. Really helps, because there are times when things are really down in the dumps. And I'm like, thank God for this podcast.
Oh my God, yeah. I did not know all us podcasters feel this way.
Yeah,
because so many days in lockdown, especially, times have been kind of low. Yeah. And the thing that's been once a week kind of bringing me joy was recording with Ayushi. Yeah. Now we are in Goa together, so I'm very happy anyway.
Also, I'm very happy that two friends are together in a lockdown. That itself is a source of joy.
And we have to...
after 6 months, we have met. Can you imagine?
Wow. So we haven't recorded, like literally, I think the last 5 months of episodes for our show has been all remotely. And for us, because so much of the show is about the connect and the vibe between us, it was challenging in the beginning to not be able to see each other and have...
and touch each other and vibe off each other. And now we are together and I was just like, Ayushi, are you ready to cuddle? We both got tested also. We are all negative. I'm so happy. Chalo.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One must travel responsibly, but you know that already.
And what a lovely segue into you travel.
So, again, travel also, I would say it sort of happened by accident. I mean, first exposure to all travel for most Indians is summer vacations to your nanny's place. That is the norm, right? But then I think when I really started traveling independently was when I did my master's. I was on an exchange program to Singapore. And we had sort of a 2-week break, right? And a lot of guys were like, okay, let's go back home. I'm like, what's the point of going back home in 2 weeks? And you're anyways going to go back home in 2 months, right? So, and thanks to Southeast Asia and cheap flights. Yeah. So I booked a ticket to Cambodia, right? Because one, visa on arrival, so less painful and cheap country. So I had budgeted something and I borrowed money from my sister because I didn't have too much then. And I landed up in the country and realized that traveling doesn't have to be expensive. I think that was the first realization which it hit me because as a student, of course, I went into a hostel, but in the hostel also I went to a dorm and they were bloody giving dorm beds for $1 a day. I was like, this is cheaper than India. This is ridiculous, right? So I spent a week there and I had a visa for Vietnam. So I spent a weekend again in Vietnam and I had no itinerary. I just went. I think there are, of course, some massive advantages of being a man in this world. So, helps. You can just do whatever you want. And
you can show up anywhere and be like, chalo, I'll take a room here tonight, I'll take a bed there.
Bring that up.
Yeah. Like, the extent of harassment I faced there was only some people constantly asking me whether I want to bang a chick or I want drugs. That's it. That's it. It was so hilarious that, they say it as if, they're trying to sell sabun. And I'm like, I don't know whether to laugh or cry at this.
Because, like, culturally, that's so part of that whole tourism industry over there that is so
a lot of people from the Western countries have this Oriental women fetish, right? So a lot of them come just for that.
Yeah. Asian women, definitely.
Women fetish, yeah. Yeah, but that was the extent of it. And I came back and I'm like, this can be done. And then
the travel bug had bitten you, basically.
Yeah, seriously. And of course, then I graduated and I had an education loan. So adulthood problems started. Paying off EMIs. But then 3 years, kuch nahi hua. 3 years, I was like, let me just pay off this bloody loan and get on with my life because I don't want to sit with this for the next 7 years, 8 years, whatever tenure it was. So, of course, I paid it off quickly. And that's when I started traveling extensively. So, started first of all in India, then went to Turkey. And then every year I made a pact that at least one trip in India, one trip internationally.
That's so good though. That's
because I also find that there's this huge craze of people saying that let's travel internationally. I mean, India has enough and more to see. Let's not discount our own country.
We're both nodding ducks right now.
Because even I see your family does this also. You all do one international trip and one Indian trip for sure, right?
Yeah, and I fully accept that this is a very privileged thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that. I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but we do have a tradition which is like every December we definitely take a family trip. And we make sure that it's in India because, first of all, December, the best weather in the country
is in India at that point.
And also, it's just every year we've been I wouldn't say surprised because I think that's a silly thing to be surprised by, but it's just every year your expectations are just met and exceeded. And you just, like, there's no comparison in terms of these experiences we've had in India. You're like, yeah, of course. Europe is beautiful, so is South America, everything, no doubt.
But in India, you have everything. You have the sandy beaches and you have the snowy mountains.
And you have pickle, nimbu, kanda.
Everywhere your food is sorted. That's the best part.
Rytasha, you are talking like Patel Tours and Travels, by the way. Right? Let me just remind you of that.
I am Gujarati, so I must be
I am half Gujarati because I grew all my life in Gujarat. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
But it's like the ease of traveling. Also, I do feel like traveling with your grandparents and elderly people in India is definitely easier.
Yes.
There's the hospitality that you get in this country is just unparalleled. So I could not...
Atithi Devo Bhava.
My nanny says this to all the people that we meet at the hotel. Let's not get it. But we definitely try to do that one out, one in kind of a thing.
So then you say...
Yeah, so that's when I said, okay, let me at least do this much, right? So of course I started with the cheaper countries, right? So I took a friend's trip to Turkey, and incidentally just after that, Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara released, right? So we had been to Turkey as 3 friends, and also everyone was like, oh my God, you work ahead of the curve in that. And I'm like, please, like, let's not glamorize travel only to what we see in cinema. There's a lot more to it. And
but please say there's nothing like, that montage where now when you're driving past something, you turn on the music, you have no choice, but you make 5 thumbs and you do this.
I always feel like Hrithik on a road trip.
Unfortunately, we were in an open Jeep. We couldn't do this because the movie hadn't released by then. So, we didn't have those moments.
We've been doing this here in Goa, making waves on the window. But I just realized that people can't see us, so this was a slightly wasted joke. But
okay, guys, this is the Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara hand waving motion sitting in a car. I don't know if I can explain it any better, but yeah.
So tell me, how many countries have you seen since the travel bug bit you?
About 20 plus.
Which was now in 20 something. When did you start?
2013 odd I started.
7 years? What a guy.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, taking a 3-month sabbatical helps, right? It really helps you.
That's true. You can couple out.
Yeah, but then I also am very, very clear now is that I don't want to rush through places, because one thing is clear, you are not going to see the entire world. It's a given, right? So whatever you see, at least see it the way you will remember it in a great way the rest of your life. Create that sort of a stronger memory. And you can only do it if you are slow. You can't really rush through life and expect to retain what you are seeing.
And I think that concept of leave something for next time is a great way of approaching travel, because you sometimes get so stressed out that you're not going to do everything. You're not going to be able to fully get all the sights, all the pictures. But I like this idea of, save something for next time. I'll go again. I like that future hope of travel also. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Not that COVID has.
Yeah, let's talk about
Did you have trips booked for this year also before pandemic hit?
No, so luckily my wife and I, we went to Italy in December just before things got bad.
Oh.
So that was our anniversary trip. And then we went to Sikkim in February just because we had some time off and we're like, let's do it.
You have enjoyed like anything.
Enjoyed this year.
Yeah, and then you know what happened since March.
You all know. Utsav bhaiya Italy jaake aaye hai. And Sikkim also. It's so beautiful, I've heard.
Oh, yeah. This was my second trip to Sikkim. Absolutely.
So
I know that this is like a generic question. Actually, why don't we take a break?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we will come back with a generic yet interesting question.
See you on the other side.
Welcome, everybody, to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel. It's been a great week on the network this week. If you haven't been paying attention, please do listen to some of the shows. We had Chetan Bhagat. This was the first returning guest on Cyrus Says. Do check that out. Great episode. We had Palak Zatakia on Advertising is Dead. Really interesting conversation was had with Varun. We had another crossover on the habit codes. Zarina Poonawala showed up over there to have a discussion with Ashton about anxiety and pressure. Begin the Journey with Ashish Vidyarthi continues to kill it. Please definitely do check it out. An old friend, Vijay Koshi, was on Storytellers and Storysellers. Do check that out as well. And I'd like to mention one thing. If you're a Tamil speaker, you should definitely check out our podcast, Kadai Podcast Punyan Selvan. Kavita Jiva has done a fantastic job to finish up her first story. It is the last episode, which just came out last Monday. Do check it out if you speak Tamil. It is an incredible achievement. Please do check that out. And with that, let's get you onto your show.
Welcome back.
I've just taken over Utsav's podcast. I feel I'm just like...
We have a lot of freedom energy right now. We've not been Kaidi gets out of the gym.
Yeah.
I just want to talk with everyone, be everywhere.
Yeah.
But my interesting question I was going to ask.
Generic question.
Was your top 3 countries to travel to? Or maybe not as a recommendation, just where you enjoyed the most.
So see, there are some biases built into this already, right? Because of course I cherish my sabbatical because I feel it was a great time. Also because I think apart from, I briefly lived in China, so that was a little separate. But apart from that, I got to stay in a country for a month, right? And that really, really changed the way how I started looking at places, how I started looking at people and culture, right? So it's almost like, if you go to a country for like a week, you see the tip of the iceberg. Right?
Yeah,
if you go to the country for a month, you see a little more. Of course, you don't see the whole thing, but you see a little more. But the little more is extremely revealing. So for me, Bosnia-Herzegovina is one of the best countries I've been to. It's supremely underrated. And if I were to, if Rytasha from Patel Tours and Travels wants to market it, I would call it, the charm of Europe at the cost of Asia. Right? It's really cheap, and I have a bit of a bias towards places which have a mix of cultures. So, and Turkey, Bosnia, so where you see a lot of European or sort of Christianity architecture with Islam, right, coming together.
Yeah.
And it brings out very, very interesting things in terms of food, in terms of rituals, in terms of architecture, and so on. So that, and also because that was a time when I set out, I decided that I'm going to write a book about this whole experience, right? And thanks to the time, I actually managed to finish writing it. I never got down to editing it properly. So it's been sitting with me for the last 2 years. But I never thought I'll be able to sort of, achieve something, because as an adult, you get waylaid by so many other things. Ye ho gaya, wo plan chhut gaya, ye nahi hua. And I was like, ab nahi kiya to kabhi nahi karne wala hu.
Way of life by waylaid.
But as he has taught us, the takeaway is it's now or never.
Yeah, it's now or never. Absolutely.
Kaal kare so aaj kar, aaj kare so ab.
True.
Oh, you're a shy now.
And पल में कोविड होएगा, travel करेगा कब?
Oh my God, yeah, no, please don't make these sad jokes, very dark. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you said Bosnia.
Bosnia. Then I think I would also pick Argentina, right? I traveled with a couple of friends, and I saw Patagonia, and I have read so much about it. So I read Bruce Chatwin's Patagonia before I went there, and I was blown away. I'm like, this is better than the book. Of course, reality is always better, but it was amazing. Like I've seen a fair bit of the Himalayas in my travels, and I think the Himalayas are absolutely gorgeous. But Patagonia was just another world. And I was honestly a little short of words on how amazing I thought that entire thing was.
That's
it cost
awesome.
me a bomb, but it's okay. I saved up for it. But I think Argentina definitely, if you have the patience to get there, because it takes like almost 36 hours of flying to get there.
Yeah.
That's my biggest fear, to travel so far for so long.
You truly don't enjoy?
I have not gone only to the Western Hemisphere. Anyway, we'll come to that later.
And number 3, you have to give your third country.
Number 3 is a bit of a difficult pick. So I did love Turkey. Unfortunately, I'm not very happy with the way Turkey has been developing over the last few years. It's going a little more fundamentalist. But I had a great time in Turkey. I would also pick Armenia, because I probably had the most interesting experiences in Armenia. And I'll tell you what, for example, I met the last remaining Aryan priests of Armenia, right? So they have Aryan rituals, but 10,000 odd Aryans left. And there are only 3 priests in the country. And I actually stayed at one of the houses of those priests by absolute dumb luck. It was just on booking.com, one of the cheapest places to stay. And it had good ratings. And I'm like, and so they were very happy that I'm from India. And I'm like, this is not the reaction we get with the nationality generally. So what is happening here? right? And they started asking me about,
you met our ancestors.
Yeah, so I'm like, are you Hindu? And have you read the scriptures? And I'm like, no, I'm not read the scriptures, so I have to disappoint you. But and what happened was, incidentally, there was a wedding. So actually, they took me to the Aryan wedding, right? So I saw an Aryan wedding with fire, right, for a country which is 99.9% Christian, right? And it was an unparalleled experience, right? I mean, I don't think any amount of beauty of a place can give you this kind of experience.
Of that. Yeah, of course.
Right? And it's like,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's like you're seeing the last people of a race and how beautifully they're trying to keep their identity alive, right? And this is probably one of my most different, but an experience which stays with me till now, is there is an organization called Halo Trust, which does landmine removal across the world, right? And they have an office in Armenia because there's a conflicted region between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's called Nagorno-Karabakh. I also went there for cheap thrills because it's disputed, and I like dark tourism. That's why I said to jana chahiye. And I just went to their office. I just wanted to make a small donation because I'd seen some of their work in Cambodia when the first time I went, right? Because Cambodia had also had a lot of landmines with the border in Thailand. So I just wanted to make like a small donation. And they were so shocked that a tourist has walked into their office that they first gave me the entire tour facility. And they told me that if you are available tomorrow, we will take you to an active landmine site and show you how demining is done.
Okay? That's so cool.
And I am like, guys, I think your funds are better used elsewhere. Right? You don't need to take a tourist who has donated probably some $20, $30, whatever he had to your cause. He's like, no, I want to take you there because this has never happened in our history of being in this country for the last 6-7 years. So they actually took me to a landmine site, and it was at the top of a hill. So of course, it was a strategically important point from a war and military perspective, right? And it had a completely destroyed monastery. Only the structure was standing. Right. And that's what gave me the idea of the title of my book. It's called Monastery in a Minefield, right? Which essentially talks about the experience of travel and the conflict of emotions, right? We feel so many emotions which we travel, right? So there are positive emotions, there are negative emotions. And I also want to talk a little bit about the negative emotions of, fear and self-doubt and all, which no one really talks in travel writing. Travel writing is all so happy and the world is amazing. And it is. I'm not skeptical about it in many, many ways. But there are a lot of other things which you see, which you cannot ignore, right? I mean, it's impossible today you travel and ignore climate change around you, right? Or you ignore the impact of patriarchy on women. You see it across the world, no matter whether it's developed or developing, you will see those things. So the entire idea of the book was that, it's essentially you're living like in a monastery in a minefield. There's a minefield all around you, right? You have to find that sense of who you are and try and see whatever change you can bring in a very, very small way. I'm not saying that all of us are capable or are motivated enough to bring big change, but whatever you can. And I'm now segueing randomly into my episodes, but that also gave me a lot of, motivation to talk about Indian food from the lens of caste, class, and gender, right? Because I don't think it's something which a lot of people, we all talk about how great food is. And by the way, India is amazing with food, no doubt about it. But there is a lot of layering which we don't see or we have forgotten when it comes to Indian food. So I think, that one reason why I would pick Armenia as my third destination, right? Because
I would like to say that I too have supported Armenia for many years now. I watched Keeping Up with Kardashians, and
great.
That's my.
I'll give you a top tip.
Don't mention that when you're in Armenia. Everyone would be laughing right now.
I don't even know this joke. I don't understand.
The Kardashians, they're ethnically Armenian.
Oh yeah. So, by the way, don't say this in Armenia because it really pisses people off.
I know that. They had that Armenian episode where they went to Armenia also.
I didn't know this.
Though, to be honest, since you're such a fan of Armenia, you should watch the episode where they went to Armenia. Because they did a lot of they did a lot in terms of bringing light to the fact that there was a genocide in Armenia that a lot of people aren't aware of. I mean, I knew before the thing. I don't want to say, but never mind. But they went to the war memorial, they went to the genocide, history museum and all that stuff. And they showed a lot of the country and the people, the food, the clothing, the dance forms and stuff. Even there's this other show, the Conan O'Brien show, and his assistant is Armenian. So he takes her to Armenia for this offshoot show where they just do a little docuseries, travel docuseries on it. And actually, Conan O'Brien does a great show on Netflix. It's called Conan Without Borders. And it's just him going as a slapstick kind of emissary from America to all these different countries. Like he goes to Korea and he goes to, he's gone to, I think he's gone to Jamaica, he's gone to Italy, he's gone to Armenia, and he's just himself in all these very different countries and bringing down those barriers between like American tourists and Europe, the Far East, all of these different things. And but again, that's more on the tourism and travel media industry. But yeah, that's cool that those are your top three. That's an interesting mixed bag. You are clearly partial to Eastern Europe.
For sure. I'm partial to any place that is cheap because I'm cheap. So yeah, I think it goes.
But it's so nice because often we do think that to see the world, one does need to have a lot of money and deep pockets. But it's so nice to hear your experiences where one can save up and really like commit and just manage in a budget.
Yeah. And I've also realized that in most cases, people are more than happy to help you. So if I've met 100 people, on my travels, I think I've had a positive experience with maybe 95 plus of them, right? And I've had people, I was in Bosnia and, I wanted to go to this really remote village and there was no public transport. I literally hitchhiked my way. And to the last point I came, I could only find one ride in an hour and that guy was going in the opposite direction with his family. He took a 7-kilometer detour to drop me to the village just because he's like, you're not going to get anywhere. So let me just drop you. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. This guy.
So that's wonderful.
Right. And he's talking to me and he's trying to understand. He was like, oh my God, you're from India. How did you come to know about Bosnia? And so I was talking about, what I was interested to come to Bosnia for. And he said, I'm so happy to hear that people think of Bosnia apart from the war as well. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the strongest memory people have, right? In the 90s when we were growing up, we could see some of these images on television of the war in Bosnia, right? And of course, the country has moved past it long ago. But at the same time, there are some remnants in memories and how people have been affected. So that was a great thing because then he also told me that, in this village, you could go to this guest house and, this lady is really nice. And she was really nice. And from here you can go hike. He gave me like a good 15-minute lowdown of the entire area, what I could do. Right.
This is like an experience that I had in France when we were on a road trip and this was like pre-Google Maps. Obviously, this was like because we always traveled with a physical map and followed places. And we were trying to get through a specific town on a specific route because that was supposed to be scenic or whatever. And we couldn't quite get it right. We couldn't read the signs. And even though my mom spoke French, my dad was like, we should stop and ask. Or we were all like insisting that we should stop and ask. And we stopped at this construction site on the side of the highway. And this guy doesn't speak any English. So we're just pointing and he couldn't figure out. So after a point, he looks at us and he's like he just motions for us to wait. And he goes like 5-7 minutes away, calls another guy and he drags him over and he like points to him. He says, Picasso. And I'm like, what? The guy takes out a pen and a notepad and draws a map for us, exactly how we're supposed to go, and he like draws across where like there's this point where you can maybe see the sea, and then another point where you can see this tree. And he's drawn this vivid map, and the original guy's like, Picasso, see? And I was like,
so nice.
It's just somebody wanted to help you for the sake of helping you.
That's really, really beautiful. Both of your stories have been very wholesome, which is why I would like to interject and make our listeners here to hear about my family road trip experience. Where a small incident happened where we have also asked for instructions, for directions, put the window down, and we were in Rajasthan, okay? We've done a road trip from Bombay all through Rajasthan a couple of years ago, 2012 or something. So we are driving. Then we've gotten lost for a long stretch. We couldn't find anyone. Our map had died, all of this. We've asked a lady. She has picked up a big rock the size of my face. Not responded, about to, like she almost threw, like we saw her bending down to pick it up after we asked for directions. My dad has slammed the accelerator and we have driven off. She's thrown the rock on us. She threw a rock? She threw such a big rock. She threw the size of my face. Can you imagine? So, there is real fear out there in the world, I would just like to say.
I've heard bad stories, but this is just intersection of weird and bad.
Also, this is another issue. You never told me this story.
Because what's there to tell? I mean, like, it happened.
I was got stoned by that.
It was one rock. She was one old, thin, frail woman, but had enough strength to throw a rock. Any day.
Did you guys find where you...
Yeah, we went on a very bad road for 18 hours. We were on a very bullock cart type of road. My mom and everybody were cursing each other. Finally, we have reached, and then we're like, oh, wow, love Jodhpur or something, wherever we go. It's beautiful.
She doesn't even remember where she was going. She was like, oh my God, I'm so traumatized with this rock incident and I don't care where I'm going anymore.
The traveling with family is such, like, it's a fun, but it's such a trip.
Yeah, really, traveling with family is a trip.
I am.
The evolution of traveling with them, like now as you travel like adults together as a family, as opposed to when you were kids and it was like two parents and these two like wild rats that are just like excited to be out of school. It's so cool to see that as well. Like, it's been fun to experience travel through those different lenses, right? Like as a road trip with our family and as opposed to being taken on holiday.
Yeah. And I think it's also kind of nice that at this age, you're able to plan travel for your family rather than they planning for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're saying, okay, we'll take you
my
out.
resident assistant.
I am my family's travel agent and I'm my mother's personal secretary. She is trying to come to Goa right now. She has not looked at anything. She has sent me a list of places. Rytasha and I have got on recce driving me. Is this place available? Are you taking guests? So yeah, booking for them and making that ease for them is good. It feels like giving back
in whatever way
you can.
Yeah, true. So one of the things which I want to do, I mean, my sister and I have been discussing this for the longest time, is that we want to take our mom abroad because she's never been abroad, right? So we want to take her like for once. But then, of course, we plan to do it this year. COVID happened. A couple of years ago, my nephew was born, so it was difficult for my sister to take time off to travel. So hopefully after all this amazing COVID is over, we will go somewhere. But yeah, that's the plan.
Where do you want to take your mom? Does she have a dream destination or something?
No, so she doesn't. But at the same time, what I understand also is that I think a lot of parents of, like people who are parents to us of their generation who have not traveled much, for them, natural beauty is the idea of travel, right? They will probably not be as wowed by architecture or, food.
Grandparents love to see scenery.
So yeah, so I think it's going to be Switzerland. That's what is in marketed to us.
Switzerland is the best, okay? Yeah. It's the best.
It's the full hara bhara kebab. It's just lovely to see.
Yeah.
I'm sure your mom is going to enjoy that trip, which will no doubt happen. You've made so many trips happen so far. I'm sure this one will be like a piece of cake.
Yeah. And in fact, this also reminds me that I think you just mentioned that Rytasha, it's in the now or never thing. I think it really, really works for travel, especially because I remember when I first wanted to go to Argentina, I asked for 3 weeks. Like beyond 2 weeks is a little challenging at most organizations, right? So I asked my boss and...
Listen, one second, pause. What is this place of yours that is giving... No, Sarah, leave 3 weeks.
I left it now, yeah. I just left it last year.
Sabbatical.
I'm sure they're valued employee.
I'm sure people want to apply to this.
So I stuck around there for 5 years, okay. I really liked the place. I worked there for 5 years. And I had really, really good bosses. And I went up to her and said in August that I want to take 3 weeks off in December. Because we had a lot of clients in the Western Hemisphere. I'm like, anyways, for Christmas, it's going to be off and there's not going to be much work. And she's like, do you think 3 weeks is a little long? Work is going to get affected. And then I told her that, but if I don't do this now, when will I? Chutzpah, like no logic. Bol diya matlab jaake ki abhi nahi karunga to kab karunga. She looks at me for 2 seconds and like, yeah, fair point, okay. And she actually
you have to chance me dance. You have to chance me dance. Seriously, like you just take your shot and go for it, which is what I would do.
So once I did this, when I started to approach the sabbatical conversation, one thing I was clear that if they say no, I'll quit. Because I know that itna experience I have that I can get another job if I just need to get a job to make a living, right? I think they also understood that. So they were like...
Yeah, that works also. It's like an adulthood journey where you realize that what are your priorities. I think we spoke to Rega about this in the 50th episode also, of living for the now.
Yeah.
We also spoke about it like generationally, how that our generation wants to invest more in experience-based like memories. And
Utsav is a living example.
Yeah, exactly. There were some really good statistics on that.
Yeah.
Just about how we'd rather invest in these experiences, these adventures, as opposed to more safer or more like generic forms of investment.
Or more, I think materialistic acquisition of things. Right? Like, buying something to sort of signal that you have either you're arrived as an adult, or you have achieved whatever you're supposed to achieve at this point of age. I think that needle has definitely moved. But to give a simple example, in COVID, Airbnb experiences has really taken off just for that reason, right? Yeah, of course, people have want to travel, but experiences itself is like, you give me a wine tour sitting at my house, I'm still willing to take it and pay for it because it's an experience, right? I want to get something out of it, and that is why it also takes off.
Of course. I think travel is like possibly the best way to get to know. We've said this again as well, because we did an episode on food as well, remember? We said that like food is one of the best ways to get to know people, like having dinner at someone's dinner table, sitting down and breaking bread together, having a meal. That's what it was. We were like, that's...
I remember this, and I'm sure every Indian who has traveled abroad has a story of interacting with the Pakistani. But mine was in Ecuador. So we were in Quito, and I had already spent like I think 8 or 10 days in Bogota, and we were doing a side trip. And I was tired of eating steak, okay, and started eating meat without too much masala. And I was like, I am done because I can't eat that much meat per se, right? So we found this Indianish restaurant, of course, and the guy was Pakistani. He was so thrilled. I'll tell you, not because we were Indian. He was like, I have found someone who understands my language, who understands where I come from. Right?
Of course.
He refused to take money for us. We haggled for half an hour.
I've had a similar experience from actually a Pakistani guy as well. But it's great. Food is a great equalizer.
It's so beautiful, what you guys have just talked about in these experiences. And I want to ask you, Utsav, and you, Ayushi, because both of you have definitely traveled more than I have. What makes you want to keep traveling? Like, what is this need to travel? What is this? Why do humans need to travel?
Why don't I go first?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that you can wrap up your show.
And I can ramble on as I've been rambling. So yeah.
Yeah, no, but that way you get to give the listeners your nice.
Thank you.
I think Tash and I have discussed this a lot because we've known each other for a long time. I'm so grateful to my parents for having taken us to so many places when we were younger, and definitely a privileged traveler that way. We used to go on long holidays every year, summer break, we were never here, and they kind of insisted that, like you said, instead of buying material possessions to show that you're doing well or that you've arrived or you've kind of moving up in the world, it was more like, we're going to go to a brand new country that no one else has ever been to. We're just going to pick up a car in one city and a map and drive. That's legit how we've done it, which was a great way of seeing a city and a country and people, because you're not restricted by like some tour guide or only specific sites. So that having been my experience of traveling my whole childhood, I don't want to travel any other way. Like, I want to go to a country to fully get your hands dirty in it and to just immerse yourself as much as you can in a respectful way, of course, like definitely respectfully, because some of my best memories are associated with travel. So when you say what is it that fuels you to want to keep traveling in a certain way or to keep exploring, it's because almost in an addictive way, I'm just looking to recreate that. Oh my God, it's so much fun to be in brand new, and so much to learn. And I love fun facts. So like going to new countries is just like fun fact. And yeah, I think I'm just kind of looking to recreate those memories that I had because they were just the best days of my childhood.
I have not traveled that much and I've always wanted to. Like, I want to find a balance between these, find a way to travel comfortably but also affordably,
Yeah.
And the few times that I have traveled and really enjoyed my experiences wherever I've been and come back, it's so nice because you get to go to a place, you get to learn about something over there and something about people at large and human behavior. And then you come back home and then you realize that you are no longer the same person you were before you went on that trip.
Travel changes you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's like that saying.
You get better as a person every time you travel. You just keep getting better.
It's like they say, it's never the same river, right? So something like that. Yeah, I actually identify with what both of you have said. I also have a slightly more selfish reason for this, which is that if you think of anything which you possess, in terms of buying anything, right? I mean, you buy the fanciest car, you buy the fanciest house and everything. Its charm depreciates over time, right? The only thing whose charm increases over time is a memory, right? Because you can play it 1,000 times over, right? The advantage is that if I accumulate 1,000 memories by the time, let's say I'm 60, I will have enough fuel mentally to keep going back to those conversations with people, with my loved ones, with my friends, because that's an infinite reward, right? Because everything we own materially is going to wither away with time, right? So that's one big motivation for me to travel. The second is that I think over time I have become a lot more empathetic because of travel, right? I think I've become less rigid about my ideas.
Yeah, we've said this on the show as well.
Yeah, because what happens is that the moment you see there are 1,000 ways to live life, which are completely different from yours, you realize that whatever has been told to you that this is how a good Indian kid should grow up and do X, Y, Z, you know that it's not true. Because if you are already fed one version of reality and if you don't expose yourself to other versions of reality, right? And travel is the best way to do it, right? So because
absolutely,
yeah. So for me, that's a big motivator, and of course, feeding my curiosity of looking at the world, and that of course is there in the background, will always be. So I think those are my motivations to travel, and I also think that if more people travel, I think we would be far less narrow-minded. I think we would be far more tolerant of people's and their point of view, and we also understand that globally the challenges for all people are the same. We all care about family, about health, about money, about making something of their life, being happy at a certain level. I'm not saying that you should be in a constant state of euphoria, but you should be happy yourself at a level. I think that challenge is human and universal. And when I see it in different forms, I get really happy. For me, that is a big, big driver.
That's awesome. That should be definitely like the mentality with which you should travel and go to a new place. And I think another thing which is great is not having expectations of a place.
Yeah.
Is when you go in and you're just like, I'm just going to let this surprise me. Just, okay.
It almost always does.
Yeah, and it does. And the universe and the world has a great way of giving us the best gems when we're not looking for them. So I like your mentality towards travel. I hope more people are influenced by it and you're doing good stuff with the podcast.
It's been so lovely chatting with you. Honestly,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the 50 Club.
Yes, thank you so much. And congratulations to you guys again for being in the 50 Club. And because our podcast, I think, launched within 1 week or a couple of weeks of each other, I think we will be hitting the 100 milestone also at a similar time.
Of course.
A year from now.
That's going to be so exciting. So many more stories for you to tell us. And hopefully we all have traveled.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you. Even I wish.
Seriously.
So one recommendation, listen to episode 39 of Agla Station Adulthood because it is about travel. Right. And that's where I realized that Ayushi likes to travel a lot and she's traveled a lot in her childhood. So yes, I did my research before I came on.
I also did research. I thought we were going to talk about China, unseen and all.
I don't know if there's enough time to discuss. So yes, so please check that out because I think it's a very interesting episode and it sort of talks in a very sweeping way about, in a very large swoop about how younger people are approaching travel and why they're doing it. There is a good mix of facts and of course opinions, which is what we all come for in a podcast eventually. So
if you liked this podcast, please check out all other podcasts on the IVM Podcast app or the IVM Podcast website, which is ivmpodcast.com.
And you can follow us on our social media handles at Just Ayushi on Twitter and at AyushiA9 on Instagram.
And you all know me, I'm too popular, RYTASH on Instagram. Yeah, and IVM Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And Utsav?
Oh yeah, sorry. So you can follow me on YVTravel42 on Instagram and Utsav Mamoria on Twitter. And of course, follow IVM Podcast because they make these two wonderful podcasts happen. So yes, please follow them as well.
Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you for actually having me. You guys actually had me on the own podcast. So yes, thank you so much.
Bye, Utsav.
Bye, guys.
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.